like to call to order the July 24th, 2019 Chautauqua County Legislature meeting. Anyone to speak to the first privilege of the floor?
Hello, thank you. George Borrello, County Executive, Irving, New York. Just wanted to briefly speak on the motion tonight to oppose wind turbines in Lake Erie. I have a lot of deja vu right now because we went through this when I was first a county legislator. And this horrible idea, like a scene from a bad horror movie, is rising from the dead again, like a zombie, and coming forward to destroy our economy, to destroy the environment and the ecology of our lake, and to promote a really bogus political agenda, which is all this is. The reality is these wind turbines are not efficient. They're not effective. They're not going to do anything to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions and all the other things that those folks that are concerned about climate change want to achieve. This is all about profit. This is all about greed. And this is all about political opportunism. So I am really glad to see that this legislature is going to stand up like we did 9 years ago and oppose this. Thank you all for your support tonight, and I strongly encourage a unanimous vote to oppose this horrible idea that's risen from the dead again. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak to the first privilege of the floor?
Hello, my name is Mark Twichell. I'm from Fredonia. I'm speaking for the concerned citizens of Cassadaga Wind Project. First, I'd like to thank the legislature for considering a motion in opposition to the construction of wind turbines on Lake Erie. However, I feel it is necessary to comment on the portion of the proposed motion which states, whereas there are unquestioned benefits to the development of wind farms, including the production of clean energy, creation of an electrical grid that is less reliant on non-renewable resources, and increases energy sources that are entirely domestic. My comment is in response to our county's New York State Legislative Representative Andy Goodell, who stated for today's edition of the Observer that New York State energy policy is driven by politics and polls. The truth of this statement can be found in the absence of science contained within the governor's recently signed Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. The New York State Senate in February held a hearing in Albany to adopt a draft of this bill. My wife and I attended the hearing, where I was called to testify on the impact of the new law on rural communities. I presented a petition signed by dozens of Chautauqua and Cattaraugus County citizens and 6 community and environmental groups from both counties. We were asking for language in the new law requiring scientific accountability for the actual amount of carbon dioxide emissions reduced by industrial renewable resources. There were 40 witnesses called at the hearing, and mine was the only voice of rural citizens directly in the path of wind or solar developments. Notably absent from the hearing were representatives from either New York Independent Systems Operators, which manages the power grid, and Independent Power Producers of New York, which speaks for the companies that generate the baseload power which sustains the grid. Disclosures through the New York State Article 10 process have shown that due to the need for fossil fuel backup, a 100 megawatt wind facility is capable of reducing the state's power generating emissions by a whopping 0.05%. This means it would take roughly 19 facilities the size of our county's Arkwright project to reduce by 1% the emissions of fossil fuel electricity generation. New York Independent System Operators Power Trends 2019 document informs us that upstate's power profile contains 87% zero emissions, 11% fossil, and 2% renewables, while the situation downstate is almost the opposite. Downstate's power profile contains 70% fossil, 27% zero emissions, and 2% renewables. Any consideration that Chautauqua County can contribute to the reduction of downstate's six-fold higher emissions should be tempered by New York independent system operators finding that, and I quote, because the load in the upstate region is not projected to grow, the addition of new upstate renewable resources increasingly displaces other sources of clean generation instead of allowing more renewable resources to reach customers. New York State's energy policy is now driven by a law which does not provide citizens with the science of renewable energy emissions reductions, nor does the law provide for the transparency which would reveal that the power grid in Chautauqua County is heavily supplemented by a Pennsylvania coal generating plant that does not meet the clean air standard which was previously met by the now decommissioned NRG coal plant in Dunkirk. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak to the first privilege of the floor?
Karen Engstrom, 5189 Westlake Road, Mayville. Citizens concerned with with industrial wind turbines in our region, and there are many of us, would like to thank this legislature for putting forward this motion in opposition to industrial wind turbines in Lake Erie. We see some good journalism around us this week. We see the Post-Journal and the Observer commenting on how our rate went up to 43 cents a kilowatt hour during the brief heat wave, when our normal rate is 9 cents a kilowatt hour. So from 43 cents to 9, from 9 to 43 cents is what happened. Both the Post-Journal and the Observer noted that this increase is a result of the state's energy policies. The Wall Street Journal also did the same thing yesterday in its main editorial, calling Cuomo's energy policy, quote, destructive. The Wall Street Journal predicts, quote, rolling blackouts and controlled outages due to the governor's energy policy. The Wall Street Journal also states, quote, wind, even with federal subsidies, is 2.5% more expensive than natural gas, and wind is not reliable. It does necessitate fossil fuels to back it up. Continuing, the journal says, quote, New Yorkers can look forward to paying more while getting less. The Cassadaga Wind Project is the second project in our region in Chautauqua County. It has not broken ground yet, and it can be stopped. This is how. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which is a federal agency, not beholden to Cuomo and the state government energy policy, gives the final permitting to all such large-scale projects. So far, the Army Corps has not issued a permit for this project. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers document states, quote, the decision to approve or deny this permit request will be based on an evaluation of the probable impact, including cumulative impacts of the proposed activity on public interest. The benefits, which reasonably may be expected to accrue from the proposal, must be balanced against its reasonably foreseeable detriments. I've given you a letter and this document, and the backside has these quotes on it. The Corps of Engineers, I'm quoting again, is soliciting comments from the public, the federal, state, and local agencies and officials, that's you. Please submit comments in order to consider. We ask these people, these officials, to submit comments in order to consider and evaluate the impacts of this proposed activity, unquote. The date on this says it's expired, but it's not. We've been speaking to the chief in Buffalo, and he says he welcomes more contributions to our concerns. We know that the Board of Health is going to do that based on the fact that the 6-county Western New York Public Health Alliance has done so already. And we are seeing impacts from the Arkwright situation that we need to look at. Cassadaga Wind is in Charlotte, Cherry Creek, Arkwright, and Stockton. We ask that you send comments to the Army Corps of Engineers regarding the negative health effects, the negative economic effects, and the negative environmental effects of industrial wind turbines to this region. Materials are on your desk. Thank you. I did put it in email as well. And thank you again so much for this effort to protect our environment from industrial wind factories, which are not farms. These factories have no net benefits and have substantial net negatives. Wind energy is not clean. It is environmentally and health impact negative. And by the way, all of our electrical energy sources have been domestic for many years, contrary to what your statement is. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Both motions listed on the agenda this evening have received the required amount of signatures to bring to the floor. The first motion is titled "In Opposition to Construction of Wind Turbine Farms on Lake Erie."
Anyone to speak? Mr. Bankoski.
Yes, last month, myself and my colleague, Mr. Muldowney, kind of made a statement that we would support these type of endeavors on our lake shores. And the old adage is sometimes you poke the bear. You know, you might not want to do that, but we poked the bear last month, and we had 4 other of my esteemed colleagues who represent our area along the lakefront championed with us to put this motion on the floor today. And the rest of our colleagues here, even though they can't see Lake Erie from their house, from Jamestown and from Sherman and Clymer and other places like that, agree that this is not in the best interest of the residents of Chautauqua County, and that we're taking a stand along with our county executive to tell them that we're not interested, you're not welcome here.
Thank you. Mr. Skudder.
Yeah, I'll be also voting in favor of this motion, but I do take exception to the third whereas, and in particular the one sentence that says, whereas there are unquestioned benefits to the development of wind farms, including the production of clean energy, creation of an electrical grid that is less reliable on non-renewable resources, and increases in energy sources that are entirely domestic. So I will be voting in favor, but just want to go on record that I do take exception to that whereas. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Connell.
Yes. I wish to speak in favor of the motion. I personally can envision a future where renewable energy is an important part, but still only a part of our state and national overall energy plan. We need a confluence of energy streams to satisfy our energy needs. When considering a project of this type, I feel there are 3 things that need to be considered. 1, there needs to be a direct benefit to those adversely affected by the project. 2, the location needs to be correct to ensure that the project's overall success. The intrusion on our local communities needs to be as minimal as possible. 3, the benefits need to outweigh the risks. I feel this type of project fails on all 3 accounts. A project of this type affects more than us locally. 11 million Americans and more than 6 million Canadians use Lake Erie as their primary drinking source. Its current high environmental quality and multiple recreational uses need to be protected, not jeopardized. We need to enhance its beauty, not detract from it. I will support this motion, and I urge you all also to support it.
Thank you. Mrs. Rankin.
I also will be supporting this motion, but I just want to, first I want to thank all our colleagues who poked the bear and went ahead and put this together. Really, it's wonderful that you did that. I love to see that kind of initiative. And I appreciate what Legislator Skudder and Dr. Twichell and some of the other people have said about part of it that talks about the benefits. There may be benefits, and we do need a balanced approach to renewable energy. The concern is looking at the devastation that's happened in the Arkwright area to the families, to their homesteads, to the wildlife. There's so many things that we know the problems it can cause, but what really concerns me the most is the things that we don't know, the things that we don't know that might come down the road. So that is a concern, and I'm happy to support this motion for all those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other debate, discussion? Mr. Muldowney.
Just to add, because quickly, is that the last time I talked, and I agree with everybody that
spoken. First of all, the heat wave that we had, the shortage, and the price of, and I think the woman had mentioned it went from 9 cents to 43 cents. And as we all know, that wouldn't have happened if NRG and Huntley was there. But we're a lakefront community. We're a Chautauqua County. We have some beautiful natural sunsets, and I just think that, you know, somebody else has the nerve to come and put windmills along our beautiful natural lakefront is just something that we all should stand up and say no. And I appreciate everybody's support in this.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Mr. Modell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've had great success, as we know, with our legislative subcommittee on energy, which I was fortunate enough to chair as we got our Clean Energy Communities program through. And, you know, as my colleague Kevin O'Connell stated, you know, projects need to have utility and benefit. You know, that's the two things I muster when we look at any of these projects for benefit. And that's what we've had with the projects we've worked on. This clearly is not any of these. So we've got better things to look at. Our energy subcommittee will continue to explore at our next meeting, next quarter. We're going to look into hydro. You know, we've got some reservoirs out there that are out of service for the new North County Water District. It's been some turbines. Gravity works really good, and just be smart about it. So stay tuned.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak? Mrs. Starks.
As one of the bear pokers, I just wanted to restate a small portion of that motion to make sure that we involve communication with all of our communities along the lakefront. That is within there, and I just want to make sure that we don't forget that we need to involve everyone that has a part of the lake with the decisions that we make.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak to the resolution, or the motion, excuse me? If not, Madam Clerk, could I have a roll call, please?
Pardon?
Could I have a roll call, please?
Oh, sure. Mr. Bankoski?
Yes.
Mr. Shagnon?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Gould?
Yes.
Mr. Hemmer?
Yes.
Mr. Muldowney?
Yes.
Mr. Nazaro?
Yes.
Mr. Nebel?
Yes.
Mr. O'Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Odell?
Yes.
Mr. Pavlak?
Yes.
Mr. Proctor?
Yes.
Mrs. Rankin? Mr. Scudder?
Yes.
Mrs. Starks? Ms. Vanstrom, absent. Mr. Whitford?
Yes.
Mr. Wilfong?
Yes.
And Chairman Wendell.
Yes.
18 yes votes, 1 absent. The motion is adopted.
Thank you.